person from the team actually went about doing that. So they rolled their chair all the way from the office into the tube, into the subway, uh, rode
Oh
like
my
seven
God.
stops, and then rode back into their flat. It's just insane.
Well, I mean, if you're going to be working from home for, a month or two, your back is going to be very happy you did that.
Welcome to the Compile Podcast, a show where two programmers talk about anything and everything. My name is Nick, and I'm the host of this podcast with my good friend Jasper, who's not here this week. And in each episode, we will have a topic, and the goal of the show is to compile the topic down to a list of essential points for our listeners. This week, we are joined by a recurring guest again, John. How you doing?
Hi, I'm doing as well as I can be.
Yeah. How's it going in California? You're still staying in Bay Area, right?
Yeah, I'm out in the suburbs in Palo Alto, so definitely not as bad as maybe in New York or London.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard also in San Francisco it's getting a bit intense.
I know in San Diego, someone was telling me last night, apparently it's getting even more intense than San Francisco is right now.
How's family back home in NC? I hope they are doing all right.
Yeah, they're doing good so far. It's a little scary. Someone in the retirement home next door to my grandmother's has gotten it. So I know everyone's a little on edge with that, but everyone's healthy so far. How about your family?
They're good. They actually they came to London to visit me when it was really bad back home. So they dodged that bullet, and then they went
That's
back
good.
home as it was getting bad in London. So
Yeah.
they double
kind of
dodged
dodging it. That's good.
Yeah, and they've been slowing going back to work back home for like they started rolling back work for everybody, and now you can start to go outside, but still have to like wear a mask and just protect yourself. But yeah, it's coming. I think back home it's gone into the it's not the intense phase anymore. It's sort of past that. And London's like going to step into it as right now. So
Yeah.
so almost is the same in the US. So I guess hopefully in 2 months' time we will be all right as well.
Yeah, hopefully.
All right, cool. So this week's This week's episode is also very relevant to the time, and because of the coronavirus or COVID-19, lots of people have been told by the government or their companies to work at home, and we wanted to do an episode on how or can you be productive at home, and if so, what are the steps or what are the tips that you can adopt to achieve that. So before we get into too much specifics, I want to just sort of cover a little bit with both of our experiences. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how's your work from home experiences been like? Is that always your part of your routine, or have you been like grooving into it, and what's the experience like?
Yeah, I haven't regularly been working from home before this, obviously. I was actually starting to work from home a little bit more because I've been on my job now for almost 11 months, so I was starting to feel more comfortable with the team and all, and being able to work from home. And then kind of, got the shock. It's been 3 weeks, I guess. We've been working from home now. I would say just kind of generally from a productivity level, I feel it's not been too much of a hit for me, actually, but that's partially because I work a lot with remote teams already. I think the biggest hit for me is really just the loss of the kind of more casual meetings that you do in the office throughout the day. Now those have to become much more formal and end up taking up a lot more of my time. So I think the biggest hit to my productivity has been having to have more meetings to keep in sync with everyone.
Yeah, it's not as spontaneous as it would have been, in the office, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, it's almost exactly the same as us. For me personally, I've mostly worked from home like probably like a day per week. Especially in the winter when weather isn't really nice for me to go outside. So I'm fairly accustomed to it. I fortunate enough I have a mini home office set up already, so I have a dual screen sort of, and it's been not too difficult. But I definitely felt there has been a dip in productivity, partially because of just the lack of a human touch, and you're staying at the screen all day, and even with cameras and video chats, it doesn't feel the same, does it?
Yeah. So I'm a little curious. So I don't have an office setup really. I mean, I've got like a desk in kind of a corner of my space with my monitor that I brought home from work when they told us we were going to be working from home for the foreseeable future. So I'm curious. I don't know if you want to get into this already, but I really would like to hear more about how you feel about having more of an office space. If it's more of a conscious benefit for you, or if you feel maybe it's not, like you don't think about it, but you can kind of tell it's helping.
Yeah, definitely. We can certainly get a little bit into it. I've kept this setup from uni days actually. So when not so much in Chapel Hill, but when I was studying in Edinburgh, I spent most of my time at home. Actually, I don't usually go to the labs. So back in NC, we always go to Citizen for like meetups, and we just bring our laptops and work from there. And what's different in Edinburgh is there's a lab with lots of computers, and you can just sign up. You can just like sign into one and work from there. That being said, I just thought it'd be easier for me to invest a little bit more to have the setup. So I've done that in the uni days, and I've just kept it as I moved down to London, and it has been a part of my flat in every single place I've stayed in. And to go back to the point about like, is it a conscious choice? Not at the beginning. It's mostly just because I want a bigger screen, and in the uni days when I was doing projects, it's nice to have that big screen estate to compartmentalize things. But then now I realize it's actually a huge benefit to have that, and to have a proper desk, a proper chair, office chair, and
oh man, the chair is killing me. I need to buy one.
I know, because it was funny about it, because we were talking about it with my team today. So we were allowed to bring the office chair, like the chair from the office, back home. However, there's no like help from the company, so we kind of have to just like do it ourselves. And so one person from the team actually went about doing that. So they rolled their chair all the way from the office into the tube, into the subway, rode like 7 stops, and then rode back into their flat. It's just insane.
Well, I mean, if you're going to be working from home for a month or two, your back is going to be very happy you did that.
I know. So I did the same. I didn't bring the chair back because it was just too. I have a chair at home, so it's already enough. What I did bring is, last year when I had my back injury, my physician suggested me buy this sort of like, it's like almost like a hemorrhoid donut cushion, but it just has the hollow bit out at the end of your spine. So your tailbone isn't directly pressing on the chair itself. So I got that. So that's because I already had an injury. So so they told me to buy it, and I've bought it. And then when this happened, only one thing I took back from the office is the cushion. So so I've been I'm sitting on it right now actually. So that's the one piece of equipment. But it's also nice because I think it's the same case for you. It's the same case for a lot of my friends, where when the lockdown is issued, a lot of us literally have to bring like physically carry monitors and chairs and any office supplies back home. It's a bit easier in California with a car, but now here is in you have to I've had friends who like literally carried it in the tube for like 15 minutes. And
Yeah, I can't imagine. Like my monitor was pretty heavy. I had a little bit of a issue just even getting it out to my car. I can't imagine trying to take it on the tube home.
Yeah, I know. It's I'm so grateful for that, to be honest. Like this when I set up everything, when I bought, the monitor, the keyboard, whatever, I never thought I'd be using it this intensively, because I always thought, oh, I have my actual office set up in the office. I'm gonna do the bulk of my job there. This is gonna be up to now, before the lockdown, it has been mostly for like editing these podcast episodes and
Yeah.
and chilling out. So yeah, it's nice to see that coming into use. Cool. So I want to sort of get into a little bit more into the mindset, the mental bits of working from home, because it is a fairly new well, it's not new, but it's like a fairly unadopted practice for a lot of the traditional works. And for us in the software industry, we've had remote work like for a long time. Since like all we need equipment wise, all we need technically is just a computer. That being said, there is still a lot of a bit of a mental shift that you have to make when you are working from home, because it's honestly a little bit hard to readjust to it, right? Because this is my home, and I'm not supposed to be working here.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing is, if you're, even from the software perspective, if you're doing it once, or in the Bay Area, we have super commuters that'll work from home twice a week, so they don't have to drive an hour into work every day. 2 days a week, you can kind of still be in the same mindset. I think it's a whole nother level when it's every day.
Yeah, definitely every day, man. Also, I don't know if that's the case in California. In London right now, it's like you're supposed to only go out if you're buying supplies or like having exercise and whatnot. Otherwise, you have to like stay at home the whole time, and it's honestly a little bit confining, because all you see is like everything, like probably a couple square meters of your home, and that's it.
Yeah, especially in downtown London, I'd imagine.
Yeah, so I want to get into a little bit more about how exactly to boost your productivity while working at home. And the first important principle, honestly, is think of it as still like working, right? Even if you're at home, this is technically still working. You're getting paid for this time, so sort of responsibility wise, you're still on the hook, so to speak, to be at home. Because a lot of the drop in productivity I've seen are purely psychological. Because I was talking about it with a different friend today. Being at home and being sort of in the comfort zone, to be quote unquote, is sort of like a pass for you. It's almost like a tiny holiday, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just feel that way, and then they actually started treating it as a holiday. And if you do that, obviously your mind is not going to be in a peak position to think logically and critically, and your productivity is going to dip, like, for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'd be curious to hear a little bit about like how you feel about your productivity. I think I'm in a little bit of an interesting spot right now, because we have a big deadline coming up next week, actually. So it's still been crunch time. And from my end, it's weird because during the normal work hours, I do still feel like less productive, but the work hours sort of never stop. There's no clean cut that you get in the office.
Yeah.
And that's been the biggest thing for me, is not having that clean cut.
Oh, definitely. So it's sort of similar for us. So this is like end of March, right? So it's sort of like end of quarter for a lot of industries, and there are expectations that you're supposed to meet at the end of quarter, and we weren't so tightly pressed for like any specific deadlines, but there are still internal stuff that internal goals that we set to hit this quarter. And although it's been a quarantine, and I don't know if the expectations were set to accommodate those, but I think for us, for our team, we were still planning to hit all of them if we can. And absolutely. Like over the past week or two, the work amount has been stepped up quite a bit for me as well, and because of that, and there's a definitely some there's always gonna be some distraction at home, and what ends up happening is you end up working till like 7, and then it got to like 8, got to 9, and
Yeah.
and it just started creeping into your normal life, to be honest. And
Hmm.
this definitely happens, and I think once it's important to notice that, and it's important to acknowledge that this isn't probably something this is something that you can do short term, right? So as you said, we have a deadline, and we have stuff that we actually need to do, and that hasn't been sort of impacted by the quarantine, and we still need to do it. But in the long term, once there isn't one, it's definitely important to sort of maintain that balance between work life, right? So there's a work life
Hmm.
balance even if you're at home, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm curious if having a bit more of a dedicated space that's kind of in your head been that dedicated space for a long time now, if moving in and out of that space helps at all create a bit of that separation between
Ah.
work and home to you. Do you notice that at all?
I personally haven't noticed it much because, as I said, this is sort of a home setup. So once
Hmm.
I finish my work, I do this. I don't leave it, like, I don't leave the space physically, but what I do is once it's out of business hours, once I finish my dinner, I took out my work laptop from the laptop dock, and I just put in my personal one. And that to
That's
me
a
is
good idea.
basically like once I put that in, I'm not getting notifications. I'm not doing anything. I'm not thinking about it. It's like work is done for me today.
Yeah, that seems like a really good hack when you're in a small space to, convert something from a workspace to a home space.
Yeah, I've also seen like if you have a bit more space at home, there's definitely much better you can get a much better game of the split if you have a physical split of the space. Some people put a little bit of a um not a not a closed line, but they just form a line of sorts, and then they have a separate desk for work and a separate setup for work, and it's better if you have a room or like some sort of physical distinction between the two, and then once you step out of it, it's like leaving the office, right?
Hmm. Yeah, you hear a lot about that, but I feel like what you're doing is like something I actually hadn't really heard before that I think's a good approach for a lot of like young people like us that don't have like the space to have a whole dedicated work area.
Definitely. Do you have something similar, or are you
Kind of. Yeah, I mean, I've got like a desk with my monitor and my work laptop, but I haven't been very good about creating like a full separation between like when the desk is in work mode and not, because the desk is like in my room, like it's in the same space where I sleep,
yeah.
which isn't ideal. So I might start trying to do that. Just put my work laptop away when I'm done at night and take it back out in the morning.
Yeah, definitely. One other thing I've seen people do is they will keep a space as work, and like another space as a chill place. And I think this might be a bit difficult if you are in a smaller space. But for me, it is technically possible for me to do that because my home office, my sort of home work desk is sort of docked into a corner of the living room, which was supposed to be the TV, and so I took out the TV stand and then put everything in there.
Hmm.
And if I want, I could just turn off everything here and then bring my personal laptop on to the sofa, which I have also a coffee desk, and put my laptop there and then chill out on the sofa. That can also work. The reason I haven't done that is because I don't want to spend too long on the sofa. It's like
Hmm.
my back is gonna hurt if I like sit there like for a whole night.
Yeah, definitely. So with I don't know. So that just reminded me because one thing I do is, thankfully it's relatively nice weather here in California, and we're not totally locked down. And I've got a little patio, And yeah, that's one of the things that's helping keeping me sane is just going out and sitting on. I got a little couch out on that patio, sitting out there and working. Is there anything you do that you can recommend to help kind of maybe break up the monotony a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. It's always nice to have a I can also see how that will work, because you would be in your work environment, and then you always can cue this transition period. I'm gonna be like, oh, once I finish work, I'm gonna like take a walk outside, or I'm going to look out of my window, which is a bit sad, but you can also do it for a bit, and then shift to a more casual and home mindset, right? So that could also work for me. This is not exactly the way. I don't have a balcony or a patio, unfortunately, but I do have this very big window which outlooks to the backyard of my building. And what's funny is one of my neighbors who has their own backyard, a couple weeks ago, they installed this transparent chamber in the backyard, which is like I don't know, have you seen like a big football stadium but just transparent? They just basically put one up, and they have heating inside, so they just chill out in there. And
cool.
I don't have that kind of luxury, but every time I look at it, it's like I am taking a little tiny break in my mind as well.
Yeah.
I guess the takeaway is separate it as much as you can, and think about in this sort of mental space that you're supposed to be at work, and treat it as work. And once you step out of it, treat it as home. And it's I understand it's very difficult in London or in other metropolitan cities where you don't really have a lot of renting space if you're renting. But yeah, having some plans or doing, maybe you need to do some like hacks that's just for yourself to get that sort of separation is very important. And it's really, once you know when you're supposed to focus, once you know when you're not supposed to focus, once you have that divide, it's a bit easier to tune yourself and to gain, optimize for productivity.
Yeah, and I think kind of what you're saying there is, something a lot of people are saying, but to say it explicitly is like to form a routine around it as well. Like, when you're in your workspace and when you're not. You can have your workspace, but if you're coming in and out of it all the time, it's not going to help you out. So kind of like you were saying, make sure you're consistent about defining that.
Definitely. And actually, I was doing a lot of research on this topic, and I was reading on like how other people does it. And one of the tips are, try to keep your routines as much as try to keep a routine, but keep that as similar as to your normal routine if there wasn't a quarantine. So, if you are going out for work, most of us, we go to work and come back from work at a sort of a defined time frame, right? So you go like 9, 10-ish or 8, 9-ish, and then you come back like 5, 6-ish, and trying to keep that sort of same time frame, and just sub out the commute bits, and it's actually easier. So you can just sub out the commute bits and keep that working hours, but use only part of your apartment, part of your flat as the workspace. And that has been like by far, I think, the most effective way to get into sort of a working mindset, and not being having too much distraction from the outside. From the rest of your home, really.
Yeah.
I guess so let's try to go a little bit more into the details about work. And so here I've on the outlines, I've written like a list of tips that I've felt myself was useful, and then I've seen when I was doing research. And the top of the line, I think unexpected for a lot of people, is actually getting dressed, because this might sound silly, but I wasn't doing that for the first week of the quarantine, and I felt like I wasn't like my mind wasn't at the right space of work that it should be. And then I read about it, and I started putting an actual like t-shirt and jeans that I would put on if I were to go outside, and I worked, but I still stay at home to work. But that has been a major game changer for me. Like it's helped so much to put me into the mind of like, okay, I need to work, and this is not home me, right? I don't know if you had that experience.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been the greatest about, setting up that routine. I've kind of had a morning routine where I recently got a dog, so I'll get up and walk the dog, and then come back and kind of immediately start working, which has not been working out the best. I think I need to start introducing, as a part of that, taking a minute to, something I did yesterday, and I had a much more productive day yesterday, was walk the dog, come back, don't start working right away, take a minute, get dressed, make coffee, make some real food, like take a breather, enjoy just being at home, even though, or try to, if you can, being locked inside all day. Just make sure it's still a home and not becoming just a workspace, and then start working. And I did that yesterday. And maybe it's just introducing a couple of those things. It doesn't have to be all of them. Just properly getting dressed is a step in the right direction that I want to start doing more.
Yeah, interesting, because I definitely felt like having a breather between like just before work it's definitely is useful. I was doing this unconsciously, where the first thing I do before I get into the workspace is like I make sure I have supplies of what I need, and I would get coffee, I would get some tea, depending on the day, to be honest, and just like make sure there's something that's fueling me on the side. And while I'm making the coffee, it's always nice to think, oh, it's a new day. It looks like the same, but and sort of prep myself for work.
Yeah, and I think one really important thing that I wasn't doing very well before yesterday was making sure it is very distinct. Because what I was doing before is I would get up, walk the dog, come back, start checking emails, do that for a little bit, an easy thing I can get done. So I didn't really think much of it. It's not really a very taxing thing. Then go take a break to make some coffee and come back to work. But the problem is then that break I took to go make the coffee was still like work in my mind, because I had already started working. I think really like making what I'm going to start doing is being very intentional about having that routine that is all done before you even touch anything work related.
Yeah, definitely. I used to have this horrible habit of checking work emails first thing in bed in the morning, and that's, let me tell you, like, whoever like whichever line of work you're in, that's like horrible advice to do. Once you said, you will never be able to have a good breakfast, and all you'll be thinking is like, what does this email mean, like? Yeah. So yeah, I definitely second what you said, and trying to leave yourself a little bit of space, a little bit of time to sort of prepare and then get into work. Having that little brief room is definitely super useful. Cool. And I think we've already talked about work in a separated space from where you would normally relax and wind down. I'm curious about like how exactly is your sort of day like, because like what is sort of a typical day for you? So does it sort of resembles a work day, or have you like changed little parts of it?
Yeah, so it's a little tricky for me actually, because I've kind of been getting more and more responsibility at work over the last couple months, which has started coinciding with this other big change in the work environment. So for example, over the last week or so, I felt like I've spent a lot of time in meetings, and I think a part of that is just because of the new position I have, but it's also maybe coming from the remote environment, so it's a little hard for me to tell there. But I mean, my day right now is mostly just trying to, at the start and end of the days when there are the fewest meetings, trying to get as much of my, real job, what I think is my real job done before the meetings start. Yeah. And then another thing is I found people are a little more willing to schedule meetings around lunchtime now that everyone is work from home. And I don't know if that's because of kind of the time crunch or because everyone's working from home. It's kind of a lot of confounding factors in my daily schedule. But I've been trying, the benefit of working from home is when people are scheduling these meetings around lunch, I do have kind of the ability to shift my lunch schedule a bit. So I make sure to take a proper break for half an hour to make lunch and not work for a little bit and eat, and then back into the meetings throughout the day, and then end of the day try and get some just more work done. So I mean, my schedule hasn't changed a whole lot other than being a little bit more flexible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do find the lunch bit to be quite interesting because I think what's different between us is I take lunch very seriously. So not like seriously in that regard. It's like I really like cooking basically.
Okay.
So I've got like stuff at home that I can cook up for lunch. But if it were normal times, we wouldn't be having, like, I wouldn't be making lunch. I would have lunch like probably at the office or somewhere else. But now that I have the opportunity to do, I could actually like make lunch. I do a little bit more thinking, and I actually like do a little planning as well. So like, oh, I'm gonna have chicken and eggs today, and or something like that. I've been like inventing new dishes for the past 2 weeks because I don't want to like just be stuck with like four or five like dishes that I always eat. So I'm trying to like invent new dishes, and yeah, it's quite interesting.
I mean, that's actually super interesting because I found working from home now, having to make lunch is becoming a real thorn in my side. I'm used to just going out for lunch. And now it's a whole, process of, for someone that's, I'm not as big into like cooking, trying to figure out a routine for, all right, I need to stop working and I need to go make some food, even though I don't, necessarily love the process because I need to make sure to stay fed and all.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I maybe should look into having some maybe easy and a little bit more interesting meals to make.
Yeah, there's a lot of like hassle-free ways to make it, because like if you're at home and then you own an oven, there's like there's probably like 15 dishes you can do without being too hassle. You can just like prep everything, put it in the oven, like come back in 25 minutes, and stuff like that. But yeah, I think for just to answer the question as well. For me, my schedule hasn't changed. The only thing that have changed in my schedule is my exercise time. So usually, I would go through my whole work day, and then till like 5 p.m. or something, and then I would start to go to the gym, or either that, or I go home to do my home exercise. But now that being at home and I don't need to worry about getting to work too early, I can afford to wake up and do the bulk of my exercise in the morning, so that I make sure I definitely do them, because I had an episode planned for a different friend to cover the bit about absolutely maintaining your health and fitness at home, especially now, is important. So
yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I've done that shift. But apart from that, work wise, it has just been like slightly shifted to perhaps like 30 minutes to an hour later, because I can't start at probably like 9:30, so it's a bit later. But yeah, everything else has been kept the same, and I also I take a proper hour break for lunch, because I need to like make it And the only thing I don't like about cooking is the dishes. To be honest.
Oh yeah.
And the new flat I'm staying at doesn't have a dishwasher, so I'm doing everything by hand.
Yep. Yeah. Me too.
Yeah. Cool. So I want to get into a bit more sort of details about remote work. And there's this saying in Chinese about like don't go to a war unprepared, and I think that would apply in this case as well. If you are, or if in the foreseeable future we're all gonna be working at home remotely, you want to make sure you are definitely prepared for that, right? You have all the tools that you need. So I want to just like sort of run through them quickly, and both of us can sort of talk about what we have set up, and or what we have not set up and we probably should do. And the first thing is about like as developers, as programmers, honestly the most important thing you need is every remote working tool in your computer, right? Well, first of all, you will have the computer for sure, and having remote work means your remote software toolkit needs to be there also. One of the first things I want to sort of cover with you, this might be a redundant point, is like, do you have any special setup for remote work in your IDE or editors or anything like that?
No, not really. Our development environment is already kind of set up for doing everything from wherever. I mean, the biggest thing I think for anyone maybe that's at like a startup or something is making sure your company can scale to going remote. Like we had to do a big VPN test because obviously everything we need is behind the VPN. But all our usual tools, like from kind of the development side, already sort of scale out for remote work. Is that different for you?
Not particularly. So the VPN bit is the same. So we have that set up already. The only bit that was challenging for a while was getting trying to do development work without the IDE. So because of ours is a bit special where we don't actually allow checking out code locally to your machine. So everything, you can't really install an IDE and use that because there won't be any local machines for IDE to pull from. And everything we've been doing is sort of wrapped in this web-based IDE tool. And that being said, there's no way you can get a web type of an IDE to perform as well and have as much functionality as a local one.
Yeah, that's interesting. So how does it work at work normally then?
I think it just our workstation is still powered. At home, not at home, at the office, and it will just pull files and pull all your changes from there, instead of from your local machine, because it's that's our restriction here. So that being said, for me personally, having to ditch the IDE that I rely a lot of stuff on. For example, like the key maps are a bit different, and I have like custom shortcuts I've set on my local work machine in the office, and that it just doesn't have that. It doesn't even support it in the web tool. So a lot of these stuff that you have to do the migration bit. So I guess for people who are in a similar situation as me, where some stuff or some tools are only accessible from work, you have to sort of think about how exactly you can migrate that to the remote case. In a software development case, it's almost never impossible. I mean, the worst case you can do is always just like SSH into your machine and then perform the exact same command. It's just that it won't be as quick, and it probably takes a little bit of time to get the hang of it. So yeah, I guess the point I'm trying to make here is think about what you wouldn't have if you're now staying at home, and try to make accommodations to compensate for them.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing everyone is using now is what is the really popular chat one.
Is it Zoom?
Zoom. Yeah, everyone's talking about Zoom. I mean, we use something different within my company. But how has your experience with that been?
So first of all, we don't use Zoom at Google. We have our own stuff normally. Uh, um, yeah, so it's been interesting. So there are two major drawbacks I've seen from chat tools. Is first the I think it's partially hardware, partially like setup. So we don't actually get the benefit of the good Wi-Fi at the office, and my camera on the work laptop isn't that great. So everything becomes a little bit grainy when I dial into office calls, and sometimes because in face-to-face meetings you can read a lot from non-verbal stuff, and then if it's all pixelated you probably can't tell anything. So that's been the biggest problem with me. And also secondly is just having to shift to the remote case, because a lot of especially for engineers like us, it's easier to explain a lot of things if you are face to face with a person, and also you have a screen full of code which you can point to, right? So that has not been exactly the same in the remote case. However, it is possible, and we are going to sort of cover this bit a little bit more in detail. For us, there's definitely even in Skype and in like a lot of other video chat tools, there's a way to project your screen, so the other people in the call can see exactly what's on your screen with your mouse, ideally, and then you can just point out the stuff. However, that bit has a drawback where when they can see your screen, they can't see your face. So
Yeah, well, that's interesting because we use screen sharing a lot, like you said, for communicating, looking at code and stuff like that. My managers tried to get us to use video when joining calls, but we do a lot of calls remotely anyways, and people kind of didn't have the habit of using video already ingrained. So actually, a lot of my meetings we do voice only.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been too much of a problem for me. I'm curious how much value you're able to get out of the grainy video. I'm wondering if it's something maybe we should do more of.
Yeah, definitely. I don't. Well, I don't know. I mean, it has to be on a case by case basis. But for me personally, definitely, having the face of the person on the screen with you might not be technically valuable, because like again, like sometimes it's grainy, you can't really tell what they're saying, and like you can't tell their faces. But that being said, I think it does have this human touch of a bit, that's you're not talking, because otherwise if it's pure audio, I have no problem with pure audio, by the way. It's I'm doing a podcast, and the only drawback from pure audio is like if you have it, for me, if I have it extensively for like 2 months straight, I might not remember it's hard for me to not treat it as just someone on the phone, right? Or like it's basically exactly like that. It just lost a little bit of the social touch or the human touch of that, even though it might be very small, but I think it is still I find that valuable sometimes, because it's always nice to see the person that you're talking to, I guess. Does that make sense? Or do you feel like it's totally overrated?
No, you're totally, I mean, it totally makes sense. I feel like I haven't quite gotten to that point yet, but I think what you said about, as this continues to go on, it's going to start becoming a problem.
Yeah.
Like with the human touch part.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious, because we once this started, and I think especially in this week, we've scheduled a lot of those social calls, but they are with the people in the office, but we're not talking about work. We're just talking about like how life is. Like, did you go make a grocery run today, or like stuff like that? Is that been the case for you, or have you?
Yeah, people keep talking about trying to do that, but then no one ever follows through. I think most of that conversation, people have been so my I don't know what my boss's boss sent out an email to all her reports about trying to save in an hour-long meeting 5 or 10 minutes at maybe the start or the end, just for people to kind of catch up. To kind of offset, she described it as like, those hall conversations that you're missing out on, kind of creating a space for that. So people have been doing that a little bit, not nearly as much as is recommended, but kind of just checking in on each other as we're waiting for people to join calls is more where that's been happening for us. How have you found the more like formal, like this is, a meeting to just hang out? Do you find that valuable?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, I think it's true. It's just normal for us because in my team, every day in the morning when we get into because we all get into office like sort of at the same time, and then we all get coffee at the same time. And while as we are making coffee or as we're sipping it, we are just exchanging, daily pleasantries and just talking about life and not about work at all. And that usually lasts for around 30 minutes. And, this is not to say that we don't work, but it's just that something that's a tradition, so to speak, in our team. And, once we went remote, we were trying to keep that as we can. So we're still having those. Actually, we had one this morning. It was really pleasant to see how everybody's doing.
I mean, that sounds like a really important thing to have kind of just for morale. Like, you don't want to lose something like that. It's such an important social aspect of the work life. Losing that at a time like this would not be good. So, yeah, it's great that you guys are continuing it.
Yeah, definitely. One last thing on the list that I want to cover is distractions, because this happens, honestly, too often, and it really sneaks up on you if you're not paying attention to it. For me, one of the biggest distraction I have at home is like a lot of chores that I need to do because like you need to clean, you need to do because you're staying at home more, there's like more homely activities that you need to do, and honestly that has been the biggest sort of distraction for me because I live alone right now, and it's just that living alone and doing and maintaining the sort of the house. It's been a bit difficult. What would be your? I wonder, like, what's your biggest distraction been?
Yeah, for me, it's definitely been the dog. It's kind of becoming a little bit of a problem, actually. I tend to keep, because she's young. I try to keep a pretty close eye on her, which ends up being a distraction. Once every hour and a half, 2 hours, I have to go, keep her from, chewing on something or whatever. And it's infrequent enough that I don't think about it a lot, but I can tell it's definitely enough on top of all the other distractions just day to day that it's kind of starting to build up. So I'm trying to think about how I'm going to manage this a bit more, you know.
I think pets are definitely, I mean, I don't want to just knock on pets because I don't have one. But I think I've also seen like lots of people having fun with their cats and on Instagram, and I think with dogs as well. And I think it's a responsibility and also a reward, so to speak, because heartwarming to have a pet, and I guess that would be the appeal. However, I guess in terms of work, it does sort of interrupt you sometimes, and you kind of have to deal with them.
Yeah, definitely. Like when you have to be like in the same space as them all the time, it's harder to ignore them.
Yeah. I wonder, sort of, have you had like a discussion with other friends who have pets, and is this a common problem, or is it only because like the dog you have are super young and therefore requires a bit more attention?
I haven't really. Most of my friends that have pets have cats, which are much more low maintenance. And then the couple people I know that have dogs, they're much they're more mature and they can just be trusted to do their own thing. I think I kind of have to figure out, I need to go on the forums or something and figure out what people are doing with their puppies. I mean, I have an idea of what I need to do. It's just I need to actually do it. She's just cute and hard to ignore.
I see.
It makes me definitely wonder, though. I don't know how people with young kids are managing this. I know a couple people on my greater team have had kids within the last year, and I just can't imagine what that's like.
Yeah, it's actually quite funny. It reminds me of a meeting that we had a couple of days ago. So my manager dialed in, and immediately they went, "Can anybody hear my TV?" And they went, "Not really, no." And I said, "Oh, okay. My kid's like watching TV behind me, and I don't have a home office, so I'm be banished to the living room, and my kids is watching TV." So
yeah,
but yeah, I think. Yeah, definitely. Because right now a lot of the schools are also closed, so people are sort of being forced to stay at home, especially young children. And yeah, I don't have a kid, and I couldn't imagine how much trouble it will be to keep them in line, because I was not kept in line when I was a kid. So
yeah.
But just to sort of go back to the point where there are definitely more distractions at home versus being at work, because I think every office is being optimized in a way where they try to make you productive, and by eliminating a lot of the distractions for you. And I don't think I want to suggest that I don't think people should eliminate those distractions at home, because I think they would serve positive purposes for you in other regards, but I think maybe bundling them together would be a good way to go, or perhaps like dealing with them sort of, I don't want to say putting them off, but just like compress what you need to do together. That would be a good way, because I've seen like with people who have like addiction to check their phones, and one of the ways you can combat that is just to say, okay, let's do all the phone checking in lunch hours, so that you don't check it like 11 a.m. when you're supposed to be working, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. Like, I think maybe people that don't maybe come from a technical background may not have heard about like context switching as much, but it's something I think about a lot with in my day-to-day. It applies very much, where taking just a couple minutes to go, I don't know, clean off the counter or something. It may just be a couple minutes, but the amount of time you lose coming back into work is a lot more than just that 5 minutes. So yeah, like you said, trying to do a whole bunch of things at once, so you only take that cost of ramping back up into work once.
Yeah, I guess really it's the only sort of caveat here is like you have to be able to live with some of them for a bit, because like a lot of these, for example, like if my laundry is dirty and I need to do them, it's just sitting there for the whole day. If I keep looking at it, it's gonna drive me insane to a point that I have to do it, and I break my nice bundle of work that I'm supposed to do. So really, you just need to like maintain and make peace with chaos, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And deal with them in a more sort of manageable way. And one of the things that you can do is bundle them together, or what's better is try to limit them, and try to not notice them in work hours. And that being that's setting your phone on mute, or making sure you don't get any like unexpected phone calls, or any or your dog don't run up to you or something. I don't know how you manage that, but there's some possibilities there.
Yep, definitely.
All right, cool. So I think we've talked about like most of these points already. Just to sort of round it up, I think working at home is definitely it takes more management than in the office, for sure. Because your home isn't really designed to be used this way. But that being said, because of the current situation, and we are sort of all forced to stay at home, you can always make adjustments and think about ways to have a good productive day, and also chill out and be happy. So out of everything that we talked about, is there any particular point that jumps out at you that you think is really useful that our audience should adopt too?
Yeah, the thing I'm going to try adopting more is having dedicated time both at the start of the workday, importantly, and at obviously in the afternoon or in the evening, where you're just being at home. So what I was talking about before with taking some time to make your coffee and maybe just sit on your couch and just drink the coffee for a little bit in the morning. You don't have to worry about rushing to commute into work, so take that time to just take advantage of the benefits of being at home, so your home doesn't start to feel like your office.
Yeah, definitely. So it's more about like having that clean cut of when you're supposed to be at work, and also having a little bit of breathing room just before and just after, just to prep yourself and then decompress. It's like
exactly.
Yeah. That's great. For me, I think the only bit that I think is useful the bit I think is useful for the audience is definitely having that separation as well, as you said, not getting it mixed between work and life is really, really important. That's usually managed for you, but now you kind of have to do that yourselves. Personally, I want to do the bit where the last bit that we talked about like managing the distractions and make sure they don't sort of trickle into your normal work time, because they can eat away your productivity pretty quickly. As you said, it takes time to context switch, and even if you do, sometimes even after that, it takes a while for you to like get into the problem that you just left off. And I've had this happen to me many times, even in the past few weeks. So yeah, I definitely want to do better in that regard. Cool. So that's this week's episode. Thank you very much, John, for coming. I know it's really early right now in California.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, cool. So just to re-announce our publishing schedules, all of our new episodes are being dropped in London time, 11 a.m. Saturday, and you can find we're gonna do a YouTube premiere where I'm gonna sit next to my computer and just answer any questions that you might have on live. If not, you can always come back to listen to it on YouTube. I'm also going to put the audio on iTunes, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, so you can find us literally most of the big sort of audio platforms. Any thoughts that you have on working at home and what we can do, and just any thoughts really, send it to us, and we're happy to do any follow-up episode to answer them, or I could just answer them myself. And so yeah, that's been the episode. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.